off of turn number 4. The Fox City Auto Spa 150 is underway.
One thing you'll notice about the 29 carries around on the backstretch. Look out!
Wide in behind them. Gosby, McKinnon on the inside, McEwen to the outside. Oh, look out! Heavy contact. We got a parking lot over in turn number 1. If Dylan Gosby has anything left in the tank, now is the time to show it. Down the backstretch for the final time. Corey Hall will come off turn 4 and will win the Fox City Auto Spa 150.
Welcome, race fans, into episode number 1 of Super Late Model Series After the Checkers. My name is Denver Matchett, and I am joined by Reegan MacAulay. You guys all know Reegan from our Facebook and YouTube pages, doing race previews. We've listened to the fans. We listened to you guys. We've heard that you guys wanted some more content, some post-race recaps, and some podcast-style content. So we're bringing it to you. This is episode number 1. Reegan, what do you think? Welcome to After the Checkers.
Yeah, for sure. Welcome on. First of all, very flattered by that intro with me, of course, right there. But as you were saying, we're a fan-focused series. We want to get back to the fans and give them what they want. And this is just one of those things.
Absolutely. We're at the start of something special here. We're in year 1 of the Super Late Model Series here in Atlantic, Canada. And Reegan, this past Saturday, round number 3, the Fox City Auto Spa 150. So we're recording this on Monday night. The race got over Saturday night, just after the 11 o'clock hour. Have you had enough time to process everything that we got to experience and witness on Saturday night, Reegan?
Well, remembering how the past 2 races were, it still takes a lot of time. It still takes plenty of time, especially to having to unravel everything on the night when everything's all said and done and it's dark and late in the night trying to pack things up, and then you may not be back home or back to a hotel until like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I know some of us had to deal with that. And yeah, I know how tired I was, and I'm sure, drivers and you guys are also dealing with that. It's just kind of a thing with everyone, but that's just what happens whenever you race at night, and just things are spectacular as we saw on Saturday night.
Yeah, for sure. It was a long, hot day and a long, hot night, both on and off the track at Petty International Raceway. Reegan, we saw the first 2 races. Really, if you want to count the first 3 attempts, as the Fog City Auto Spa was originally rained out. But, when we raced for round 2 at Oyster Bed Speedway, everyone was wearing snowmobile suits. It was about 10 degrees ambient temperature with the wind chill. I think it was like +4. And now we went to the other extreme of, I think with the humidity, it was pushing 40 degrees on Saturday at Petty International Raceway, but that didn't stop the crowd and the drivers from turning out and putting on a show. And sometimes, Reegan, when it's a little hot outside, people get a little hot under the collar as well. But nonetheless, we were treated to a very exciting race. It doesn't seem to matter what the temperature is. These drivers get behind the wheel, they put on a show.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, the heat's always gonna get at the fans. Things might get messy behind the scenes and such, but again, people got to prefer the heat over the rain, because again, Petty was a rain date, supposed to have it back in early June to begin the month before Oyster Bed, and then of course Oyster Bed we have to deal with the cold, and it wasn't a perfect crowd by any means, but we still got people to come out, and it was still a fantastic show. burning to death, and the sun beaming right down on the fans on the front stretches. It's kind of like National Super Speedway in a way. Whenever NASCAR had their races at the daytime there before going over to nighttime. But again, though, it was good though. Whenever our feature came along, the sun was right down below the horizon and wasn't as hot. Fans were able to witness the track without having their eyes burnt. And yeah, again, too, for being a rain date, we were originally at like what you said, I think 28 cars, and we unfortunately went down to 22. But knowing how the race went overall, I think we can still say that for that and a rain day, we still got a fantastic show regardless.
Absolutely, Reegan. It's always tough whenever you have a rain date, and especially this past weekend, there's the first really truly nice weekend of summer, and there was a lot going on. You had the Atlantic Nationals Car Show in Moncton, Cavendish Beach Music Festival. Hey, not to mention the IWK 250 is coming up next week, and a lot of drivers focusing on that $20,000 to win race. So to get 22 cars for a race that got rescheduled is still an incredible field, and it was a competitive field from start to finish. I think besides a few drivers that broke in the opening laps, I think almost every driver had a turn in the top 10 at some point throughout the night. Pretty well every driver in the field faced adversity. I think we can say, Reegan, that every driver in the field faced adversity, because I think at the end of the night, Saturday, after we saw Corey Hall show the way for 144 of the 150 laps and hold off a lot of challengers, it kind of looked like the track position, having the lead, worked to his advantage. But we'd come to learn after his victory lane interview and going through post-race tech that he actually even faced adversity. He ran over a starter with 60 laps to go in the race and caused damage to his car to the point that he didn't know he was going to make it to the end.
Actually, yeah, that was the first. When you were telling me that was the first time I had ever heard about that. So that on another incredible storyline along with the other ones too. But the way I see it with Hall dominating is, I love it. Like, fans might think a driver dominating a race, like you see how Max Verstappen's done in Formula One. People might just get bored and such, and they will just be like, "Oh, there's nothing going on," But the way Corey Hall dominated the race and won, it wasn't easy. It was absolutely not easy whatsoever for him, and that's what I personally love to see. And that battle at the end too, after how, I guess, messy the first half was, it was, a spectacular ending. And with, again, with the sun being below the horizon, not burning anyone anymore, got to witness two of Atlantic Canada's best clash at it for many laps. And I was wondering at some point, was Gosby going to eventually give him the bumper? But no, he did not. And eventually he was kind of going a little bit too hard in those final laps. And it was kind of a grip thing too, because that inside line was just not really, getting enough of that grip, and Hall was just keeping it right around that middle lane in the corners, and it worked to his advantage. And we even saw with the 03 of Steve Halpin even starting to catch up very slowly. And I would say if there were maybe a couple more laps, or if we had a restart, I think he very well could have entered the battle there and made it a three-way battle for the victory.
Absolutely. With Steve coming up there at the end, another 5 laps, and it would have potentially been a different story. But the number of laps led doesn't tell the whole story for Corey Hall, because he had pressure and plenty of it from Gosby. There was different times that it looked like Gosby might just be able to complete the pass. But, Reegan, we saw all night, like you said, that inside line just didn't quite have enough. You really had to work and really muscle your way around a driver to make that inside lane work. And we saw it on restarts where the outside lane got a huge launch. I know some people thought that maybe Corey was jumping the starts, but he was following procedure. He was just getting the launch of incredible launches coming off of the outside groove, coming off of 4 to the green flag. And it really factored into the way the race played out. But what I like, Reegan, is the way that both Hall and Gosby raced at the end. It was a clean, respectable race. Dylan Gosby had the opportunity, and Corey Hall said this in his post-race interview. He could have used him up. He had the chance to put the bumper to him. He didn't. They ran each other clean, and that's what fans want to see. Sure, people like a little bump and run every once in a while, but two of the best running each other clean, trying to make the pass cleanly side by side. Sure, you're gonna rub fenders a little bit, but that it doesn't get any better than that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, fans will want drama. It happens in short track racing nowadays. The way it's gone now, you would expect a bumper run everywhere, and you would want that. And you think if it doesn't happen, then boring ending, blah blah blah. You go home, you're disappointed. But no, what we got there was absolutely perfect, and it's also what we saw back at Oyster Bay between Greg Proud and Darren McKinnon. Obviously, what happened there with Allison McKinnon, that little fiasco. I mean, that had nothing to do with it. That final finish there, I was really wondering if McKinnon was going to give it to him, but no, he didn't. Gosby didn't either, playing it very professionally. And speaking of McKinnon too, the racing guys just don't love him, and they don't allow him to mix with consistency whatsoever. Like back to the front. It was just back and forth for the number 18 car. And yeah, it started 4th, finished 16th. Only 103 laps, and then he had to go off. What was it? Was it a wreck that he got involved trying to recap my memory there.
Well, it was quite a day for Darren McKinnon. It was almost
Yeah.
like stocks on the stock market. I mean,
Oh, I remember now.
you want to go up and down. It was very early in the race. He was battling with Ryan Messer for position number 2, and they made some unfortunate contact going into turn number 1. And Ryan spun out. No one really got any damage, but of course, both drivers had to go to the rear. And then McKinnon went to work driving through the field, much like what we saw at Oyster Bed Speedway. He put on a charge and got all the way up to second. And I think everyone in the crowd thought he was going to challenge Corey Hall, but I believe he had either a mechanical issue or a tire issue on a restart. With about 50 laps to go, and all of a sudden he starts dropping like a rock. And one of the more intense moments of the race, Reegan, when Robbie McEwen and Dylan Gosby made a 3-wide pass on McKinnon as he battled this issue. It was only a couple laps later that the caution came out. He had issues getting into the pits and almost spun the car out. And it would be on the ensuing restart, we would see calamity ensue. And he was unfortunately, being at the back, caught up in a big wreck that we saw in turn 1, which was one of a couple wrecks. But, I think the story, sure, we had a lot of cars get tore up, and it's super unfortunate. You never want to see cars get tore up because everybody knows how hard these drivers work on their cars. But the reality of it is, besides that restart wreck, which was, I would say a byproduct of the way that inside lane worked. The other wrecks, just fluid on the track. I think, for Greg Proud, they said it was like a $5 part on a power steering hose came apart. And unfortunately for him, he spun out in his own fluid and the track was completely soaked in. That's when we saw one of the hardest hits of the night when Ryan Messer made contact with the passenger side door on the 29 car. And then Dave Oblinus also had nowhere to go. And we had a 3-car parking lot on the backstretch.
I mean, yeah, too, and it's kind of what we saw there on that little first incident there with Lonnie Somerville breaking early on there too. But again, yeah, it wasn't really a case of just drivers going out and beating and banging short track race and like all that. It was just a bunch of cases of out of control circumstances. Like the track is like you lose grip, those spots lose grip. And shenanigans just hit the fan, and it was unfortunate too to see for a guy like Greg Proud, because again he was the defending IWK 250 champion, looking to participate and go back to back this year, but unfortunately he's not going to be able to do that. But again, it's just it's completely out of control. You were saying something there?
Hold the phone on that, because I think I know the crew at King Competition is going to be working hard on that 29 car. I think.
I did see that.
Yeah. I think Greg Spotter said that it's almost shades of last year, and that's what they're gonna use for motivation heading into this weekend. Because right before the IWK 250 last year, there was a pro stock race at Petty, and Greg Proud got wadded up, and his car got tore up pretty good.
Go figure.
And they went to work. The King Competition crew got that car back together and ended up scoring the victory in the IWK 250. So they're going to use that as motivation and hope that history repeats itself in 2023.
I think I might have actually flipped them. I think it was Ryan Messer, I believe that was the one that said they're not going to go with it because of being unprepared there. So that's my mistake right there. But yeah, that's very ironic to hear now from you there. But yeah, again, just out of control circumstance. And also too, another guy, number 85, Kenny McKenzie Jr. getting his car all torn up on that restart wreck. Hearing him during that pit pass interview, he just wanted to finish the race, come home clean. Unfortunately, the complete opposite of that happened. So rather unfortunate for one of Petty's more popular guys who we saw. Also, I mean, he was dealing with issues the entirety of the weekend, because back on Friday, I think you had more of the specific details on what was going on those the Friday night practice sessions. Like he was literally going out after practice was over and he had the hood all exposed.
Yeah, I believe they were having quite a few issues with the car. There was mechanical problems. I don't remember exactly what they said it was, but they did end up missing the heat race. They couldn't get the car to keep running for quite a while because Kenny rolled on the track for his heat race, and he never got to see the green flag before getting pushed off. And it was just unfortunate for Kenny. I think he had pretty well gotten woed up to miss the big pileup in turn 1, and a couple other cars didn't quite get stopped, and it was kind of a domino effect, and Kenny ended up being in the middle of the dominoes, and quite a wild ride there was 2 or 3 cars there, Reegan, that as they kind of were blowing up and colliding into each other, that got a little bit of air. I think Chris Duncan's car. I think Darren McKinnon got to see what springs he was using, because his car was pretty well on top of Darren McKinnon's for a brief moment. So it was just unfortunate to see. I mean, the first 2 races, we didn't really see any cars leave the track on a tow truck. We had a few more this weekend. I think from most of what the drivers are saying, it sucks. There's a lot of damage, but it's damage that's going to be able to be repaired. They're going to be all right, and I think everyone's going to be able to get their cars back together. And but it was just one of those nights where just circumstances seemed to play out. But like we said, Corey Hall was up front driving away with it with some hard challenges, and I think that really kind of that was the big takeaway at the end of the race. That's what the fans are going to be talking about is that exciting finish. Of course, everyone's talking about some of the wrecks as well, but just so many storylines coming out of the Fog City Auto Spa 150.
Well, that's the thing too. Messy first half, but then we got that battle at the second half, which kind of diverts the attention away from how messy and everything was at the start and how long everything took. As we know, obviously the caution periods were quite extensive. The race definitely could have ended maybe a little bit earlier than it should have. But again, that late battle that we got definitely got the attention of the fans. And that's, of course, what we want to see. And I was going to go back to Mackenzie there, too. He was doing the double duty, obviously, in the sportsman's. And even he was doing some stuff there. I believe his whole right front there was completely exposed during that whole race there. And even sportsman's had shenanigans right there. But again, one driver I want to personally touch upon, he started in second place, finished 5th. Absolutely outstanding performance from the number 52 from Royal Road, Dustin Tucker.
Yeah, Reegan, Dustin had a phenomenal run. And if you remember, we chatted with Dustin here at Oyster Bed Speedway before round number 2. And we were kind of talking to him. He had some tough luck to start the year. He finished 22nd and 24th in the first 2 races, but it didn't reflect the speed. That was a car consistently in the top 10 on the timesheets and practices. And but Dustin said, 660 is his home track, but he finds that Petty International Raceway is his best track. And that was a statement that seemed to hold true on Saturday. He had a clean race. I don't know if he ever really drifted back much farther than 5th or 6th place, and was looked at one point like he might challenge for a podium, and brought it home 5th. A much needed run for that team. That's a small operation, a family operation. Dustin's dad, Sean, a multi-time champion of regional racing here in the Maritimes. And, Dustin's a 3rd-generation driver, actually. And, a much-needed run for that team and some good momentum to carry into the second half of the season.
For sure. And I believe he was about 20th in points before Petty, and now he's all the way up to 14. So that's definitely something. I'm sure, again, for what you're saying, they're a small operation, kind of the start he had to the season. I would think he would be hoping for maybe somewhere around the top 10 in points. Although looking at how the points are obviously right now, it's pretty loaded right there with a lot of other guys. Like, again, you got, that'll be another driver to come up with. Like, you got a guy like the number 2 of Ashton Tucker back in 10th. But of course, like we saw at the Pit Pass interview to begin with, Tucker was not the guy in the number 2 Brad Siliker Motorsports entry. It was actually number 2. It was Jonathan Hicken, 7-time Petty International Raceway winner, many Mike Stevens and River Glade trophies, of course. And, he was in a similar situation as Darren McKinnon, but it was kind of a flip where, he was up and down, going to pit road many times, but he still was able to come home in 6th place, which again, for his first race since the 2021 Mike Stevens Memorial, that's still pretty outstanding for the guy, where they call it Hicken's house.
Definitely. It's kind of a glass half full or a glass half empty way to look at the way Jonathan Hicken's race went. Teamed up with Brad Siliker Motorsports. That was a brand new car. That was actually the first race that team got with the car after some previous issues. Jonathan said during the pit pass on Friday night that he really just wasn't quite comfortable in the car. Obviously, there's a little bit of a size difference between Ashton Tucker and Jonathan Hicken. But in the early laps of the race, Hicken was up to 2nd, and it was hard to tell if he had anything for Corey Hall, if he was just kind of biding his time, saving his equipment, or if he was pushing and trying to catch up to him. But we saw an issue. It looked like a tire issue on the 2 car and a sway bar issue all combined. They pitted after the caution came out when they got slowed up in turn number 3. And when they came back on the track, there was a lot of sparks coming from the 2 car. And I thought that their night might be over, but they just were able to catch a couple cautions at the right time to keep working on that car and getting it fixed. They were able to salvage a 6th place finish, which, being able to salvage runs like that on days where things aren't going well is very, very crucial. And, I think, when you put a substitute driver in, a driver like Jonathan Hickens, a super sub, I'm sure they expected to win, but, with a substitute driver, nothing to be ashamed of with a 6th place result. It was maybe not the finish they wanted, but definitely a strong effort from that entire Brad Siliker Motorsports team.
And yeah, that's going to help the number 2 team stay in a decent position there in the standings. I mean, they're still there in 10th place, and looking down the rest of the top 10 too, there's the number 32 of Chris Hughes. He started 18th out of 22 cars, finished 7th, and that's back-to-back top 10s right there. Coming off of Oyster Bed, no surprise there whatsoever for the guy from Brackley Beach, and it would be no surprise whatsoever to me if he was able to again at Oyster Bed when we get there in August. There could be an opportunity right there for 3 straight top 10s.
This is a driver, Reegan, that I really want to take a moment to talk about because, for Chris Hughes, we talk about small teams. That's another team that's, they don't really operate with a big budget. They just kind of make the races that they can. And when they first announced their 2023 schedule, the only races that they planned on competing with the Super Late Model Series for were the 2 Oyster Bed Speedway dates. Both races for Chris so far, he ended up adding Petty to his schedule after a good run at Oyster Bed Speedway. But, he has had races where he struggled in the heat races with losing a couple spots with our passing point system. It put him deep in the field in a starting position, but they just fought both races all race long and to come away with 2 top 10 finishes. This is one of the craziest stats, I think, Reegan, that I was looking at. And maybe crazy is not quite the right word, but maybe it's more surprising. You look at all the drivers that have competed so far, and sure, Chris has only run 2 of the 3 races, but he has the 4th best average finish of all competitors so far in 2023. Obviously, Dylan Gosby, our points leader, has a 3rd place average finish, and then we got Robbie McEwen has a 4.5 average finish, and Steve Halpin has a 6th place average finish. But right there in 4th is Chris Hughes, 7.5 average finish. And I'm sure, looking back at what could have been, if he had have known how these races were going to go, I'm sure he kind of wishes he was at that opening race at Speedway 660, because if he didn't miss that race, he could find himself right up there in the top 5 or 10 in points.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you going off that list right there, Hughes being in 4th, were you able to write down any drivers behind Hughes so you can kind of give a bit of a glimpse on who he's in front of?
Well, he's in front of a lot of drivers. We got Troy Burke and Ryan Messer. Each have a 9th place average finish. Nicholas Noggle missed Saturday. He has a 10th place average finish, along with Lonnie Somerville. And everyone behind that, Corey Hall's a 10.5, Ian Rasmussen 11.5. So there's a lot of so many contenders. Dave Oblinas has an average finish of 11.5 as well. Ashton Tucker / Jonathan Hickens, average finish of 12th. So a 7.5 average finish is ahead of a lot of the drivers that people picked to win the championship this year. So Chris Hughes is having some very strong efforts, and I think that team is. I don't know if I would say that they are surprised with their own success so far, but they definitely have to be thrilled with it. And if they keep putting up performances like this, you knock on the door of top 5, you're eventually going to get a top 5. Then you're going to start knocking on the door of podiums. And like you said, heading back to his home track of Oyster Bed Speedway, he's a former champion there in the late model division and back in the day. And there's a lot of positivity out of that 32 team, and just being able to survive and never give up and put up some strong performances.
And that's another thing too with the points as well. Corey Hall up to 6th in points, 237 compared to the 287 with Dylan Gosby. And we've seen how consistent Gosby has been with his 4th, 3rd, and 2nd place finishes in the past 3 races, which if that pattern suits itself, then we could very well see a Gosby win at Oyster Bed if that were able to, the racing gods wanted to do that right there. But again, though, Hall finished 9th, 660, and then Oyster Bed, he deals with problems there. And then he goes on to win here at Petty, which that right there could very well give him momentum to even like maybe jump from 6th to maybe somehow getting on the podium there, even begin to fight Gosby there for that top spot. And going back to some of these results too, you mentioned Troy Burke earlier, starting 9th, finishing 8th, solid finish for him. Final car on the lead lap, the number 94, Ryan Rains, go figure, sponsoring Fog City Auto Spa in the Fog City Auto Spa 150 right there. Started 17th, finished 9th, kind of a similar situation there to Chris Hughes. And then there's a guy that we decided to give a little bit of the spotlight in the race preview video for Petty International Raceway in the number 81 of Ian Rasmussen, who's a guy who, he's not really talked about, I guess underappreciated could be kind of a term in there, underrated. It could be any term right there. But Ian Rasmussen there pulling off a 10th place finish after starting 19th and, 13th in points. And he was, alongside a guy like Greg Fahey. Those were the 2 guys we were kind of looking at for, they're not really talked about that much. But, Rasmussen's doing very solid. He's got 2 top 10s in 3 starts. So he very well deserves to be talked about because he's very well an underdog.
Absolutely. Flying under the radar is a great way to put a guy like a Chris Hughes, like an Ian Rasmussen, and even a Greg Fahey. Now, Greg Fahey, unfortunately, had a little bit of tougher luck this weekend, still came home with a 15th place finish. But for Ian Rasmussen, they have a new-to-them car for this year. They've been trying to work through some bugs and get the most out of it. And back-to-back top 10 finishes, no matter how you spin it, that's a positive result, especially in a field as competitive as what we are seeing. And the top 10 finishes, ironically, came at tracks where Ian, he had experience, but not a substantial amount of experience at both Petty International Raceway and Oyster Bed Speedway compared to Speedway 660, which is his home track. So, there's a couple drivers there that, flying under the radar, quietly and consistently putting up good runs and making themselves, challenge for top 10 in points. And again, before long, challenging for top 5s. Like you said, Ryan Rains, he is the Castrol Rookie of the Race for this past week. 3 races, 3 different Rookies of the Race presented by Castrol. We had Curtis Collins at Speedway 660, Kenny McKenzie Jr. at Oyster Bed Speedway, and now Ryan Rains. This rookie battle has tightened up a little bit. Unfortunately, Kenny Snow was unable to attend, but with Kenny McKenzie Jr. finishing 17th after getting caught up in that wreck and Ryan Rains finishing 9th, they're now, I think, 6 points apart in the point standings, and that's what decides Rookie of the Year. And with 3 races left to go, the 94 and the 85 are set to put on a battle for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, for that Castrol Rookie of the Year award for sure. And another guy that we also had a pit pass interview with, the number 43 of Hudson Weston. Very good starting position of 5th. Finished 13th. Not too shabby, kind of middle of the field right there. And we were, talking about kind of dealing with a bit of a snake bite because, finished last at 660. Wasn't even able to make it to Oyster Bed. And then coming into Petty International Raceway, he had, within the past couple of weeks, 2 podiums at Speedway 660. So there was momentum coming in for the number 43. And, it's kind of like maybe a slow build back up in a way there where he was able to, come home 13th, which not too shabby, only able to do 114 of the 150 laps. But again, that is still an improvement of some kind, which is what we want to see and what they want to see. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it's still one of those runs that you wonder what if for Hudson Weston. Definitely an improvement. He didn't even get to start the feature at Oyster Bed Speedway. So, he was able to finish 13th this time. That's a massive improvement, but it's also a disappointment because at the time that he broke, he was running in 5th position. He showed great speed all weekend, and this was his first time at Petty in a super late model car. And he had a very impressive run going, and unfortunately just luck was not on his side, and it was not to be. But that's a driver that whenever he gets those bugs worked out, whenever luck gets on his side, he is going to be a very consistent threat to win. He's proven that at Speedway 660 in their weekly racing divisions. but he's just like you said, a little bit snake bitten on the super late model series. But forward progression would be the story for him from Saturday, although it wasn't quite the result that he deserved, and it doesn't reflect how he ran all race long.
Yes, indeed there. And just my final thoughts there on some of the rest of the results. Again, we're talking about guys like Darren McKinnon, Greg Proud not getting greatest finishes. Again, those two guys, if you flip them, top two at Oyster Bed back in June, but we still have plenty of time before we get to the Universal Truck and Trailer 150 in August, which will be plenty of time for them to be able to prepare their cars and come back and, put on a show once again and improve on the results that we saw out of them at Petty. And they'll be able to have a perfect opportunity to get themselves back up in the standings again. McKinnon holding 7th right now in a tie with Lonnie Somerville, who's another guy who will want to definitely get an improvement after finishing last and only completing, it was 6-7 laps on Saturday night. And then Greg Proud back in 11th right there in a tie with Greg Fahey. So, and then of course, guys like Ryan Messer and Dave Oblinus as well. Messer sitting 5th in points, Oblinus at 9th. They'll definitely want to look to improve. And again, though, for guys that were decent at Oyster Bed back in June, they definitely could very well, just like McKinnon and Proud, be able to find redemption whenever we get back on Prince Edward Island in June or in August.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this weekend, the Fog City Auto Spa 150 was round number 3. So now that race is complete, we are officially halfway through the 2023 Super Late Model Series season. We have visited every one of our 3 tracks once, and we have one more visit at each of them to come. The point standings is very interesting because a lot of the drivers that people were picking to win, like we said, they've had adversity. 6 races, Reegan, is not a lot of time. You have to be nearly perfect because that's what we're seeing up front is Dylan Gosby has been very consistent. He hasn't maybe scored the win yet, but 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you don't get much more consistent than that. And Robbie McEwen as well with 2 4ths and a 6th. Those two have not had a true bad race yet. Every other driver in the field has a finish outside the top 10. Except for those two, and they are kind of distancing themselves. But you look at Saturday night, you look at Ryan Messer. He was 2nd in points entering. He gets caught up in a wreck. Greg Proud was coming up the standings after his win. He gets in a wreck. Dave Oblinus, Lonnie Somerville, the list goes on. Darren McKinnon. All of these drivers, they now have a big challenge ahead of them, and it's going to be exciting to watch who can fight back and who can overcome the adversity in the last half of the season. And I guess, will we see a bad race out of the 16 or the 40 teams? What do they have? Can they maintain this consistency? For Dylan Gosby, this almost came apart for him on the 6th lap of the race when Lonnie Somerville blew up or had his issue that put fluid on the track, because Dylan Gosby almost climbed the anthill for a light pole in the infield. So to be able to come back and finish 2nd was a very impressive result. And that's what championship seasons are made of. Reegan, before we wrap it up, I want to give a little bit of love to both Steve Halpin and Troy Burke. We mentioned that they're 3rd and 4th in points, but I think the beautiful thing with the Super Late Model Series this year is just how competitive every driver in the field is. Anyone that's paid attention to racing over the last 5-10 years should know that Steve Halpin and Troy Burke are very talented drivers. Troy Burke's a multi-time champion at Oyster Bed Speedway. Steve Halpin, former multi-time podium finisher in Speedway 660's Pro Stock 250, but neither of them have really had a full breakout season. Steve ran a lot of part-time years. Troy never ventured a whole lot out of Oyster Bed Speedway or off the island. This year with the Super Late Model Series, they're proving that they are going to be superstars in this sport and in this series. 3rd and 4th in points. Troy Burke and Steve Halpin both have led a lot of laps so far this year. Burke at Oyster Bed Speedway, Halpin at Speedway 660. Some good results out of both of them. And I wouldn't count either of them out yet to pull off a championship. And I don't think anyone was picking Troy Burke or Steve Halpin, especially when you look at some of the other drivers in the field. But either of them winning a championship is a very real possibility with 3 races to go.
I mean, that's the thing too. We're halfway through the season. Time flies by way too fast. But it is what it is right there. But again, that it's just, going back to the 16 and 40 and even the 03, the biggest question there is, we saw at Gosby, 2 perfect races and then kind of had something happen at the start of Petty, but he's able to come back around and still be right up there at the top. The biggest question is, are we going to start seeing more of that? And is something finally going to give? We've been seeing that with other drivers. It's been, all over the place, and that's what's making all of these races exciting. We're seeing back and forth action between different drivers. We're seeing, like you said, Steve Halpin and Troy Burke finally getting that perfect opportunity to really show off how truly talented they are. And they're really proving that so far. And again, we're getting to that second half of the season where what we just saw at Petty, and again, what we've seen at 660 and Oyster Bed, we're going back to these tracks at least one more time each. And knowing that what we just saw this past weekend, knowing Petty is the season finale in late September, we may have just gotten a pretty solid preview for what the finale is going to look like heading into there. Of course, we're not there just yet. We still got to get through Oyster Bed Speedway in August. But other than the drivers too, I would just like to give a shout out for that decision of yours to go for the split screen graphic and getting someone to go in the infield and get a camera angle from there, which was absolutely perfect. Because I know with the front stretch camera, there were a little bit of obscurities with the flag stand and a couple of wires hanging over top there. But I know that that infield camera actually caught a lot of incidents with some pretty good angle and just a lot of good racing from that angle too. So if we're able to carry that on into the next couple of races, I don't know if we'd know about Oyster Bed Speedway for sure, because knowing what I've done at Oyster Bed, I've been doing I've been starting to record full races from mostly the infield and knowing how wide open it is there, how close I am to the action. A little close for comfort, but it's possible. And if we can start seeing more of that, then we're really going to start getting a lot more attention here and really, giving to our fans. And again, just bringing that attention in. That's what we want. And we even saw that too. That's what we've been getting too on our social media platforms. And with our full race replays, we're getting thousands and thousands of impressions and views, and it's awesome we're going to get plenty more of that with 3 races remaining. And again, Oyster Bed's looking like it's going to be one hell of a show.
Absolutely. It's all part of the process of starting this new series. We're learning every race, and Rome wasn't built in a day, but pretty exciting to see the product that we've been able to witness. And it's all, the drivers are the ones that put on the show, and we can only do so much. It's them that are out there taking all the risk and driving it in deep, making the crazy passes that make these races exciting. And I think we got some of the best drivers in the world here on the Super Late Model Series. But that's going to do it for episode number 1 of After the Checkers. Thank you all for tuning in, and this is all for you fans. We will send us some feedback, shoot us a message on Facebook, drop us a comment. We want to hear from you, what you want to hear, what you want to see. What you think going forward, and we're going to keep working to build this series and keep delivering the best product we possibly can. So on behalf of Reegan, I'm Denver Matchett. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on After the Checkers. But in the meantime, make plans to be at Oyster Bed Speedway Saturday, August 5th, the Universal Truck and Trailer 150. If it's anything like the last 3 races, we are in for a show. You will not want to miss it.